The Accidental Billionaire's Bodyguard Blues, a lottery winner's lament. Ever dreamt of winning the lottery? Imagine the yachts, the mansions, the endless supply of prune juice. But what if your newfound wealth came with a side of overzealous bodyguards who think squirrels are assassins? Buckle up, because Gerald's story is about to make you question your life choices. Gerald, an 82-year-old who thought his biggest problem was remembering where he parked his Buick, suddenly became an accidental billionaire after winning the Powerball. He envisioned a life of leisure, maybe finally learning to knit or perfecting his shuffleboard technique. Instead, he got a 24/7 security detail that made the Secret Service look like a bunch of toddlers playing tag. At first, the bodyguards seemed like a perk. They shielded him from autograph-seeking hordes, mostly just his nosy neighbors, carried his groceries, mostly just bags of Werther's Originals, and once heroically defended him from a rogue pigeon that dared to eye his dentures. But soon, Gerald realized he'd traded one set of problems for another, far more absurd set. Gerald's security team was everywhere. In the car, they argued about the best route to the early bird special. In the restaurant, they scrutinized the soup for potential poisoning. It was just minestrone, Mildred. They even followed him to the bathroom, claiming they needed to monitor potential slip and fall hazards. Gerald started to feel like he was living in a slapstick comedy, only he wasn't laughing. One memorable incident involved a waiter who dared to deliver Gerald's lukewarm tea with excessive enthusiasm. Before the poor guy could say Earl Grey, he was being tackled by 4 hulking figures who clearly hadn't read the employee handbook. Another time, Gerald's own doctor was nearly choked out for reaching for his stethoscope too aggressively. Gerald was starting to think his bodyguards were auditioning for a role in a Three Stooges reboot. The final straw came at the country club during Gerald's weekly golf game with his buddy Frank. As Frank approached to offer a friendly handshake, he was instantly face-planted into the meticulously manicured lawn by 6 steroid-infused bodyguards. "Good to see you," Frank managed to gurgle through a mouthful of grass clippings. Gerald, mortified, finally snapped. "Enough is enough," Gerald bellowed, his voice cracking with indignation. "I'm not the Queen of England. I just want to play a round of golf without my friends being mistaken for terrorists." He decided then and there he needed to escape. He needed to taste freedom again, even if it meant risking a mild heart attack. Gerald, fueled by a potent mix of frustration and prune juice, hatched a plan so cunning, so audacious, it could only be conceived by an 82-year-old with too much time on his hands. He would disguise himself as a regular old man. Brilliant, right? He donned an oversized trench coat that smelled faintly of mothballs, a pair of dollar store sunglasses that made him look like a confused Elvis impersonator, and a floppy fishing hat that had probably seen better decades. He even perfected a shuffle walk, complete with exaggerated hunching and the occasional groan. "Perfect," he wheezed, admiring his reflection in the hall mirror. "Now I'm just Gerald, not billionaire Gerald, just plain old, ordinary, slightly suspicious-looking Gerald." He felt a surge of rebellious energy, the kind he hadn't experienced since he snuck out of his retirement home to see a midnight showing of Cocoon. With the stealth of a seasoned spy, or at least a seasoned bingo player, Gerald slipped out of his mansion and hopped on a public bus for the first time since the Eisenhower administration. He marveled at the graffiti, the questionable smells, and the sheer audacity of the youth. He felt alive. He felt free. His destination, his favorite greasy spoon diner, a place where the coffee was strong, the bacon was crispy, and the health inspector probably had a nervous breakdown every time he visited. No bodyguards, no caviar, no Tiffany's shopping sprees. Just a man, a menu, and the promise of a cholesterol-laden breakfast. But as fate, or perhaps a particularly mischievous lottery god would have it, disaster was brewing. Gerald's quest for normalcy was about to take a hilariously wrong turn. Gerald, in his desperate attempt to blend in, inadvertently made himself look like the most suspicious character in a film noir movie. He kept nervously glancing over his shoulder, adjusting his hat, and muttering things like, "Totally normal, just an old guy doing old guy things." He was basically begging to be arrested. His paranoia didn't go unnoticed. A concerned citizen, probably someone who watched too much true crime, called the police to report a shady old man acting weird. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside the diner, shattering the peaceful ambiance of sizzling bacon and clattering silverware. Before Gerald could even take a bite of his meticulously crafted grilled cheese sandwich, extra butter of course, he was swarmed by officers and thrown into handcuffs. The indignity, the injustice. He hadn't felt this violated since the time his neighbor, Agnes, tried to steal his prize-winning zucchini at the county fair. "What's going on?" Gerald sputtered, his dentures nearly flying out of his mouth. "I'm a respectable citizen. I pay my taxes. I even recycle." "Suspicious activity," an officer replied, his voice devoid of empathy. "You fit the description of a fugitive on the run. We've been looking for you, the prune juice bandit, for weeks." Gerald was apoplectic. Not only was he finally free from his bodyguards, but now he was being mistaken for a criminal. He imagined the headlines, "Lottery winner nabbed as prune juice bandit." His reputation would be ruined. He'd never be able to show his face at the early bird buffet again. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Gerald's security team was in a state of utter pandemonium. They believed he'd been kidnapped by a rival lottery winner, or perhaps a disgruntled shuffleboard opponent. The AI Lawyer 9000 was already preparing a billion-dollar lawsuit against whoever dared to steal Gerald, while Tiffany, blissfully unaware of the crisis, was on her 12th shopping spree of the day, buying enough designer dog sweaters to clothe a small nation. The moment the bodyguards tracked Gerald's location to the local police station, they launched a full-blown rescue mission, storming the building like a heavily armed SWAT team on a sugar rush. "Hands off the billionaire!" one of them shouted, brandishing a taser that looked suspiciously like a hairdryer. Another bodyguard tackled an officer who was simply refilling his coffee, mistaking the coffee pot for a weapon of mass destruction. Gerald watched in horror as chaos erupted around him. Filing cabinets were overturned, tasers were discharged, mostly hitting innocent bystanders, and one bodyguard accidentally handcuffed himself to a water cooler. It was like a scene from a Marx Brothers movie, only with more tactical gear and less slapstick. Well, maybe a little slapstick. Finally, an exhausted officer, his uniform rumpled and his dignity shattered, looked at Gerald and muttered, "Sir, next time just tell us you're a billionaire before we arrest you. It would save us all a lot of trouble." Gerald, now sitting between his bodyguards once again in the back of his ridiculously opulent limousine, sighed deeply. He had tried to escape them. He really had. But the truth was clear as the diamond-encrusted dentures he was now considering purchasing. He was never, ever getting rid of these guys. They were his cross to bear, his comedic foil, his personal brand of absurd. He might as well embrace the chaos and start writing his memoirs, The Billionaire and the Bodyguards, a Comedy of Errors. So, what's the moral of this story? That winning the lottery is a curse? That bodyguards are inherently incompetent? That prune juice is a gateway to a life of crime? Maybe. Or maybe it's just a reminder that life is absurd, unpredictable, and often hilarious, especially when you're an 82-year-old billionaire with a penchant for grilled cheese and a security team that thinks squirrels are a national security threat. Ready to embrace the absurdity? Here's your call to action. Share this story with your friends. Spread the laughter and let them know that even billionaires have problems, albeit ridiculously funny ones. Buy a lottery ticket. Who knows? Maybe you'll win and get your own team of overzealous bodyguards. Just kidding. Mostly. Leave a comment below. Tell us your funniest old person story or your most absurd lottery fantasy. We want to hear it all. Subscribe to our channel. For more hilarious stories, witty commentary, and maybe even some tips on how to avoid being mistaken for a prune juice bandit. Go hug a senior citizen. They've probably got some great stories to tell, and they might even share their Werther's originals with you.